Tractate Middos, General Introduction. A brief history of the temple. The Torah states in Shmos chapter 25, verse 8, "They shall make a sanctuary for me." This is a positive commandment to build a house for God for the purpose of bringing offerings and serving as a focal point for the pilgrimage festivals that take place 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. In the centuries before King Shlomo ruled in Jerusalem, temporary structures, tabernacles, were built at various locations to fulfill this commandment. The first of these was the Mishkan, built in 2449, the portable tabernacle that the Jewish people took with them during their travels through the wilderness of Sinai. After the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael, the Mishkan stood in Gilgal for 14 years. Then a stone tabernacle was built in Shiloh. It stood for 369 years, and another in Nov, and then Givon, a total of 57 years. In the year 2928, King Shlomo laid the foundation of the first temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. Malachim 1, chapter 5, verse 15, through chapter 7, verse 51. From then on, this was the permanent and only acceptable site for the Beis HaMikdash. Rambam Hilchos Beis HaBechira 1:1 through 4. This first temple stood for 410 years. The Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it on the 9th of Av, 3338, and exiled the Jewish people to Babylonia. While in exile, the prophet Yehezkel saw a vision of a future temple, Yehezkel chapter 40, verse 1 through chapter 43, verse 17. That was different than the first temple. However, when the Jews returned from exile to build this new temple, they were unable to do so because Yehezkel's instructions were too hard to understand. Rambam there 1:4. Instead, they rebuilt the temple according to the plans of Shlomo's first temple, but included several changes based on the book of Yehezkel. Rambam there. Tractate Middos presents the layout and design of this second temple. The second temple was built in the year 3408. In 3741, 19 BCE, King Herod undertook a major project to rebuild and expand this temple. See Bava Basra 3b4a. Much has been written about which design is described in our tractate, the original built by the Jews or the later one rebuilt by Herod. A detailed analysis of this issue is beyond the scope of this work. After standing for 420 years, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans on 9th of Av, 3829, 70 CE. Although we have been without the temple for thousands of years, we yearn and pray for that day when God will return us to Jerusalem and allow us to witness the rebuilding of the temple once again. The practical significance of Tractate Middos. Rambam, in his introduction to the commentary on the Mishnah, writes about Middos. It is simply a report recalling the dimensions of the second temple, its design, construction, and all related manners. Its benefit is that when the temple will be built speedily in our days, it will be our duty to preserve and carry out the design and dimensions, because they were given through the spirit of prophecy. As it is written in Divrei Hayamim chapter 28, verse 19, everything was in writing by the hand of God, which he gave me understanding to know all the works of the plan. Rambam implies that the information contained in Middos has practical halachic applications in that when we build the third temple, we are to do so according to the directions continued in this tractate. Rambam implies that the information contained in Middos has practical halachic application in that when we build the third temple, we are to do so according to the directions contained in this tractate. Okay, even though the two temples will not be identical, because the second temple contained only some elements of the future Beis HaMikdash seen by Yehezkel, nevertheless, the basic design will be the same. It should be noted, however, that according to both Rashi in Sukkah 41a and Rosh Hashanah 30a, and Tosafos in Sukkah 41a and Shavuos 15b, the third temple will not be made by man, but will miraculously descend already built from heaven, as hinted to by the verse in Shmos chapter 15, verse 17, "The sanctuary, my Lord, that your hand established." According to all opinions, there is still a special significance in studying the structure of the temple. The Midrash in Tanchuma Tzav 14, see Rabbeinu Bachya to the end of Vayakel, states that when Yehezkel saw the vision of a future temple during the exile, he exclaimed to God, "You tell me to go and teach the Jews about the structure of the temple. Wait until they go back to the land, and then I will tell them." God answered Yehezkel, "Is it right that just because my children are in exile, the building of my temple should be ignored?" Studying the temple structure in the Torah is considered as being of equal importance to its building. Go, tell them to study the temple structure, and as a reward I will consider their study as though they were actually building the base of Mikdash. In the merit of studying this tractate, may we witness the coming of the Mashiach and the building of the third and final temple speedily in our days. The temple complex. The temple was built on a hill within the holy city of Jerusalem. The city, hill, and temple each have increasing levels of sanctity that correspond to the three areas, camps, into which the Jewish people were arranged in the wilderness: camp of the Israelis, camp of the Levium, and camp of the Shekhinah. These camps affected both the laws of offerings and the laws of Tumah. The city of Jerusalem. The first level of sanctity, corresponding to the camp of the Israelites, includes the entire city of Jerusalem. As with all walled cities in Eretz Yisrael, a Metzorah is excluded from Jerusalem. See Kalim, chapter 1:7. However, Jerusalem has an additional sanctity that makes the city fit for the eating of Kodashim, Kalim offerings of lesser sanctity, and Meiser Sheni, the second type of produce. See Kalim 1:8. The Temple Mount. The second level, corresponding to the camp of the Levim, consists of the Temple Mount. This area measured 500 by 500 amos, cubits, and was surrounded by walls. See Mishnah's chapter 1, Mishnah 3, and chapter 2, Mishnah 1. The most significant difference between the Temple Mount area and the rest of Jerusalem is that anyone who is tameh due to contamination from a bodily issue, such as a Balkari, Zav, Zava, Nida, or a woman after childbirth, is excluded from this area. See Kalim 1:8, Psachim 67b. To the east of the main temple courtyard was the women's courtyard, measuring 135 by 135 amos. Chapter 2, Mishnah 5. According to Torah law, this area has the same sanctity as the Temple Mount. However, it was decreed in the days of King Yehoshaphat that a Tevel Yom, a person who had immersed himself that day in a mikveh to purify himself of a tumah contamination and would not be fully tahor until the evening, was forbidden to enter the women's courtyard. Divrei Yamim 2, chapter 20, verse 5, and Kalim, chapter 1, Mishnah 8, Zavachim 32b, and Yevamos 7b. The 10 amma wide area outside the courtyard walls was known as the Chel and was surrounded by a wooden fence called the Soreg, chapter 2, Mishnah 3. The Chel, like the women's courtyard, has the same sanctity as the Temple Mount according to Torah law. A rabbinic decree was later made that forbids a person contaminated by corpse tumah from entering past the Soreg. See sources cited above. The temple courtyard. The third level of sanctity, corresponding to the camp of the Shekhinah, was the main courtyard. It measured 187 amos long, east to west, and 135 amos wide, north to south. See chapter 5, Mishnah 1. It was surrounded by walls that separated it from the Temple Mount on the north, west, and south, and from the women's courtyard on the east. The courtyard was divided along its length into areas of different sanctity. The laws of these various areas are found in Kalayim chapter 1, Mishnahs 8 and 9. Starting in the east, the first area was known as the Israelites' courtyard, and measured 11 amos from east to west and 135 amos from north to south. It was followed by another area, also 11 amos across, referred to as the Kohanim's courtyard. Beyond this was a 32 amos section containing the outer Mizbeach. Between the Mizbeach and the Heichal building was an area of 22 amos. The area containing the Heichal building measured 100 amos long, and to its west, between the building and the courtyard wall, was a space of 11 amos. See chapter 5, Mishnah 1. Each of the areas described above were flat, but they were not all built at the same elevation. Starting from the Temple Mount, a flight of 12 steps, totaling 6 amos in height, led up to the women's courtyard. See chapter 2, Mishnah 3. 15 steps, a total of 7.5 amos in height, led from there to the main courtyard. Chapter 2, Mishnah 5. A large step, 1 amma in height, followed by 3 more steps, 1.5 amos in height, ascended from the Israelites' courtyard to the Kohanim's courtyard, chapter 2, Mishnah 6. And another 12 steps, a total of 6 amos in height, rose from there to the entrance of the Heichal building, chapter 3, Mishnah 6. The Heichal building. The Heichal building had 3 main sections, the Ulam, the Holy, and the Holy of Holies. Towering above the courtyard was the massive eastern wall of the building that measured 100 amos wide and 100 amos tall, chapter 4, Mishnah 6. A large entranceway, 40 amos high and 20 amos wide, in this wall led to the Ulam, the front part of the building that measured 11 amos from east to west on the inside of its walls, chapter 3, Mishnah 6. West of the Ulam was the Holy, a large room 40 amos long and 20 amos wide, chapter 4, Mishnah 7. It contained the inner Mizbeach, used for offering the incense, the menorah, a candelabra with 7 lamps, and the Shulchan, the table for the Lechem Apanim. In the second temple, the Holy was separated from the Holy of Holies by a partition consisting of 2 parallel curtains 1 amma apart. This was different than the design of the first temple. See our commentary to chapter 4, Mishnah 7. During the first temple era, the holy ark that contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments and the Torah scroll written by Moshe stood in the Holy of Holies. In the second temple era, the ark was no longer available, having been hidden in the last days of the first temple area by King Yoshiyahu, Divrei Yamim 2, chapter 35, verse 3. And so the Holy of Holies was empty. A large stone called the Shesiah stone marked the spot in this room where the ark had stood. See Yoma chapter 5, Mishnah 2. Above the Holy and Holy of Holies was an upper story that had the same dimensions as the lower one, chapter 4, Mishnah 5. And if you buy the ArtScroll book, the diagrams on the following pages depict the Temple Mount, courtyards, and Heichal building.